What's up, guys? Matthew here, back at it again with another board game review. Before we get right into it, I just have to say, if you're hearing any stuff in the background, it's because I'm currently doing laundry, because I have work today, and I need my work clothes to be clean. Also, as you can see, I got the mic propped up on a stand now, so now I have both my hands free, so I can do stuff like this. Off with your head. I mean, if I had to do something like that, I guess I would. Today, we're going to be looking at Boss Monster by Brotherwise Games. Now, chances are you've been in like a Chapters or any mom and pop board game shop, and you've probably seen this game floating around. This game has been out for a while. It's definitely not new, but I wanted to make a video on this because I have like a very strong opinion about it. But regardless, you've probably seen this in stores and you probably thought to yourself, is it a game that pays its respects to the 90s era of games, maybe even the 80s era of video games? I personally think the game is more of an aesthetic throwback than it is an actual homage to the games of the 90s or the 80s. But regardless, you've probably seen this in stores. The box I have is a collector's box. It's like an expansion box, costs like $20, and you can basically fit every card in the game in that box, essentially, or at least assuming they don't make any more expansions. How did this game come to be? Well, it was funded on Kickstarter and made a ton of money. A ton of money was funded to make this game possible, as well as expansions possible in the future. And essentially, since it was successful, the game went on to trend for a short amount of time. People were talking about Boss Monster all over the place. People were buying Boss Monster here and there. People were very excited about this game, myself included. However, I learned about this game months after the Kickstarter was successful, as I just, seeing it in the store, and I was like, whoa, dude, what is this game, right? I had to pick it up because I was curious about what the game was. This was a game that actually got me into, like, impulse buying board games. So thank you, or no thank you on that account. But regardless, since I collected the game, since I played it, I ended up buying almost every card for this game, with the exception of a new expansion they brought out, which adds more players to the game, and the Boss Monster 2 limited edition version. I have Boss Monster 2, the regular, but there's a limited edition version that has shinies in it, basically shiny monsters and stuff, and includes, I think, like a new monster that's not part of the main thing, and it was a Kickstarter backer only reward, at least for the time being, until mom and pop shops and like Amazon started reselling the shit out of it. So I mean, you could probably find one somewhere if you really wanted it. And what can I say about this game? Well, I have mixed feelings about it, but we'll get into that later. Let's just talk about how the game works. In the game Boss Monster, you play a boss, essentially, a boss monster, as the game suggests. But you're self-aware boss monsters, and you're aware that you're living in a video game like a virtual world. And several heroes, representing like different people playing the game, are trying to just beat the boss, essentially. So the goal is to kill 10 heroes to win the game as the boss monster. And to do that, you're going to be building rooms in your dungeon that the hero has to traverse through in order to make it to the boss. And as you play, your rooms will get larger, or like will change up and will become a lot different than how you first had it. This is a really good idea on paper. I love the idea of being able to play like a boss, like play an evil villain in a game, but also like, have this like element of like people actually playing your video game and coming into your dungeon and trying it. I kind of like that. It kind of makes you feel like that's the case, even if the heroes kind of moving on their own and nobody's really like influencing them too much. And the game has like a really vast variety of cards, like a ton of variety. There's a ton of things you can do in the game. It would take forever to go over like the meta game of this, because they thought of so many things when it came to the card types and the room types and so on and so forth. There are several room types in the game, and they are related to what certain heroes are going to come and visit your dungeon, essentially. So you got the cleric, fighter, mage, and thief classes. And the whole setup is that those symbols represent types of treasure that each room in your dungeon has. And since every player in the game is playing a boss with their own dungeon, it's a contest to see who has more of a certain type of treasure. Certain heroes that will be revealed as the game progresses will have little symbols indicating the type of treasure they are looking for. So when building your dungeon, you might be looking to attract one type over another, or try and even up the split a little bit and try and collect as many heroes as you can, or or in this game's case, kill as many heroes as you can. It's a fight for supremacy because like you could have 2 rooms, each with 1 Ankh symbol in the rooms, which means you have a total of 2 Ankh treasures that will attract any hero that bears the Ankh symbol on their card. However, if another player has 3 Ankh symbols in their whole dungeon, then that hero is going to go there because there's more of it. Now, how do you play? Well, at the start of the game, obviously you're given your boss. You can choose the boss in different ways. Either like everybody gets to choose their own boss, or you can randomly assign a boss, or you can do a system where you ban bosses and then you draft them. There's a lot of ways you can go about it. It's pretty loose in that aspect. So once you have your boss, you're given a hand of cards, which is 5 room cards and 2 spell cards. So there's 2 decks. You got a room deck and a spell deck. The rooms are going to be like how your dungeon's going to be built, and spells are just additional things that you can do to screw your opponent up or give you an advantage in some sort of aspect. Depending on how many players are in the game, you have to take out heroes that bear certain numbers of like people icons, I guess you could call them. So if you're only a 2-player game, you've got to take out all the heroes bearing this symbol and this symbol, as in like one represents, this is for 3 players, this represents for 4, so on and so forth. You kind of see what's going on here. All right, so now that's all sorted out, the game can finally begin. So the first phase of the game is the heroes entering the town phase, essentially. We have 2 hero decks. We have a regular hero deck and we have a gold hero deck. Now the gold heroes, you don't touch them until the regular hero deck has been depleted. The gold heroes are essentially just beefier and tankier heroes to kind of speed the game up more. So depending on how many players are playing in the game, if it's 2 players playing, you draw only 2 heroes. If it's 3, it's 3 heroes, and 4 heroes. So you always have like a wide variety of heroes to choose from. Once the heroes are now in town, you can start to build. Now, in the beginning of the game, you're given a free room to build before your turn even starts. So you're given basically 2 free rooms at the beginning of the game, but in the subsequent turns, you're only given that 1 free build, unless you have a special power-up that gives you the ability to build more, and so on and so forth. So with that free room that you have in your dungeon, the way it works is you don't reveal what you're putting down until everyone has decided on a room to put down. So you put your room face down, and then once everybody has chosen the room that they're going to put in their dungeon, then you reveal the room that you put down. So like I said, after the heroes have been put into town, you put a room card face down in your dungeon if you want. You don't have to, but it's probably the best thing to do, honestly. So you put it face down, and then once everybody has put their rooms down, you reveal, and then there you go. That's what you built. Now, as the game progresses, you can't just continue to build rooms. Your dungeon can hold a maximum of 5 rooms, and this is where the metagame comes into play here, or at least as far as the dungeons are concerned. You can actually build on top of existing rooms if you wish to kind of change up what your strategy is. So if you're trying to attract more heroes of a certain treasure type, you can just put a card on top of another, a room on top of another, to just change up the layout, basically. Some cards in the deck are going to be called advanced rooms. And what advanced rooms are they're basically better versions of a certain treasure type of room. Advanced rooms can't be placed on their own, so they have to be placed on top of another room. However, that room has to contain the same treasure of the advanced room, essentially. If you think of it this way, it's like an upgrade of a previous room, because advanced rooms are just a lot better and they do a lot more for you. But however, you've got to have something established that shares a similarity to it. So once the build phase is over, then it's time to see where the heroes are going. So now all the players start counting up how many icons they have, how many treasure types they have. And whichever player has more of a certain treasure type that a hero wants, then that hero will go to their dungeon, and so on and so forth. There are situations where an opponent could actually take every hero into their own dungeon. That has happened before in previous games when I played this. If there's a tie between players, then no heroes move for the turn, and then the next turn starts. But assuming that heroes are moving into a dungeon, let's assume that it moves into your dungeon. Then what will happen is the hero will start moving room to room. So each one of your rooms is likely going to have a little heart container in the bottom, which will have like a number on it. And that number basically tells you how much damage that particular room will give to the hero. And the hero has a heart container in the lower corner of their card, which tells you how much health that they have. So essentially, depending on what you want, you might want to decide to build rooms differently to not attract certain heroes that might be too beefy for you from the get-go. But when heroes go through your dungeon, they'll take damage in every room, equivalent to whatever that room was dealing in damage. If the hero makes it to you as the boss monster, then you take a hit and the hero just escapes. So in the event of a wound, you keep that hero card face up beside your boss, and it essentially represents a wound in the game. If 5 heroes end up beating you as the boss, then you lose the game. You're out. But if you're able to kill the hero before they reach you as the boss, then you flip the hero token face down to reveal like little rupees, I guess, on the back, which will indicate a soul, essentially, and 10 souls to win. If you get to the advanced heroes in the game, then they'll offer you more souls, so you can get 2 souls per person. However, I believe they offer you more wounds. So at the start of the next turn, you draw more heroes into the village, and again, related to how many players are in the game. So 2 for 2, 3 for 3, 4 for 4, and each player draws a room card into their hand. So then the game continues in the same way. Now you build, and then the heroes move into their respective dungeons, and then the heroes will venture through the dungeons, and then the game goes on for another turn. So it's reveal heroes, draw a room card, build, adventure, basically. Now, like I said, I mentioned that there was a spell deck in the game, and you're probably asking yourself, where did these spells come into play? And that's one of my main problems with the game. Now, don't get me wrong, the spells are great. The spells there's a vast number of spells, especially when you have Boss Monster 2 and 1 together. You have a ton of things you can do spell-wise. Now, when can you play spells? You can't play them all the time. You can play them in certain phases. So each spell card has a symbol at the bottom that indicates when you're allowed to play the spell card. So there's 3 different types of symbols. There's the build symbol, which is kind of like a hammer. And then you have the adventure phase symbol, which is like an axe. And then you have a combination of the 2, which means you could play that card pretty much any time between those phases. So you have to pay attention to what types of spell cards you have in your hand, because you can't use all of them at any time. It really depends on what the symbol is. But the problem is, you only start with 2 spells, and it's your job to find a way to draw more spells. As opposed to having one universal deck that has both spells and rooms in them, we're instead having to build certain rooms to give us spells, or find different alternative ways to get more spell cards if we so wanted to go down the route of, collecting a whole hand of spells. With a whole deck of spells, you would think that there would be a better way to collect them. And this is a major problem, I think, with the game. The game itself plays alright, but when it is an actual chore to collect spell cards just so you can screw over other opponents, then people don't end up doing anything to each other. People just end up working alone and just contesting for one hero or the next. It was a very big letdown in terms of how I thought the game could have been. I mean, it had so much promise, and it looked very good on paper. And overall, I mean, no, there's no doubt about it. The guys who worked on it put their heart and soul into it. I'm not even like joking. Like, they put so much effort into this game, and like, it definitely shows to a degree. They definitely weren't in it for the money. They're definitely in it because they loved the board game community, and because they had a dream with the board game community, and they wanted to be a part of it somehow. And that's great and all, but the spell deck part had been completely overlooked. If you take a game like Magic, which they do, you draw some parallels to the Magic the Gathering. I mean, plenty of games probably do, and so there's no surprise here. However, like if you take a game like Magic, you just have the one deck, so your deck's going to be built with spells and monsters, depending on how you want to play. Imagine if you had two decks in Magic, one for spells and one for monsters, and you're only allowed to draw monsters. So you had to get monsters out there in order to, find ways to draw spells in order to do what you want. That would just slow down the game immensely, because you just would skip spells altogether and say, you know what, I'm just going to go for monsters and just see what happens. You end up foregoing an entire metagame because of the fact that it's a chore, it's a hassle to actually, embrace it and be a part of it. And that's why this game is a disappointment to me. Again, no hate on the people that made it, because they worked very hard on it, and it shows. It definitely shows. However, this overlooked thing with the spells is like, it really keeps me from wanting to play it, because whenever I do play it, I have to tell people, I don't know, it's a fun ride, I guess. I mean, if there was some way we could house rules the spells, or if there's some way that the people Brotherwise could, come up with an additional rule set to make the spells worthwhile, that would probably fix these problems in the game. And it wouldn't even involve Brotherwise having to re-release the game again. I mean, they could if they wanted to, and you know what? It would probably sell. I'm just gonna say that it would probably sell if they chose to go down this route. However, they could easily just make a whole new rule set, upload it as a PDF somewhere, and then people could potentially enjoy the game again, or have a new experience with the game, something that is more wholesome and something that makes the game maybe more what they were aiming at. Because from what I see in terms of the game's advertisement and stuff, is that they definitely wanted to make a new trading card game, competitive game sort of deal. They definitely promoted the 2-player game over multiple players, because they wanted that interaction. They wanted to make something of that interaction between player and player. And you can see that. You can see the passion that they have for it. But it's just, the spells are the only thing keeping me from fully enjoying the stuff that you can do. Because when you do end up getting a spell, it's very rare, and you're thinking to yourself, do I use the spell now, or should I wait until the right time? And you never know the right time to play the spell, because you never get them, right? If you were getting spells a fair bit, not all the time, but you're getting spells enough, there would be so much sticking around. So much. Players would just be firing at each other left and right. It would be chaos, and it would be a great chaos to have in a board game. So, do I recommend this game? Well, it really depends on how you feel about the spell card thing. I think it's worth it to try out Boss Monster 2, because according to Brotherwise, Boss Monster 1 isn't as good as Boss Monster 2, so they heavily have promoted Boss Monster 2 more. So it's worth maybe checking out just that game, Boss Monster 2, and seeing how you feel about the spells before, buying it. I bought all this stuff, kind of fully knowing about the spell problem. However, I bought it just because I love the look of the cards. I like the aesthetic, and I like just taking it out sometimes and taking a look at the cards and such. It was more just a collector's thing. It really had nothing to do with my desire to play this game all the time. So, I mean, you have to give them to that. They have good, nice looking cards, especially for anyone who has a nostalgia for retro games and stuff. They definitely, put a good amount of effort into these cards. So the cards look very nice, and I have to say that's amazing. Anyway, there you go. That's my video and opinion on Boss Monster by Brotherwise Games. And like I said, it's a bit of a disappointment. But we'll see what happens. Maybe something will come out of this that will improve the game. But overall, I just really wanted to give my thoughts on how I thought the game's mechanics were. And let me know what your thoughts are, and what you think the game should be, or whether or not the game is fine on its own. Anyway, leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe if you want to see more of these in the future. I'm doing these every week. So anyway, I'll see you guys in the next video. I honestly don't know what I'm doing anymore.